Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Greetings, everyone. I am Paul Everton, the host of the Truth Table. And today is season 2, episode 34, with Paul Fischer as my guest. Now, there's 3 different things that I've been involved with. One is seeking the true king, finding the true king. And that is a side project I'm doing, but we're going to talk about the monarchy. And you're going to hear things you may have never heard before. Now, I had Gordon on the show before, and Gordon, Barry James Jr., he said that Queen Victoria gave the provinces powers, over the provinces. So all the powers went to each province, and then the federal government, without consent, joined back with the monarchy with King George, Queen Elizabeth II's father. But what we're going to talk about today goes even further back, showing that even what Queen Victoria did was illegitimate. She herself didn't have the power to give the provinces power. We're going to get into that, dig into it, go right back to 1603, right after this. This is going to be a very interesting show, and luckily, gladly, we're going to be archiving it, which is very important. That way it's there for others to access. Where for the first time, the Truth Table is live on X. I've actually got a verified check mark now. That doesn't mean I'm a monarch. It just means I got an X, a check mark. Anyway, I welcome my guest, Paul Fischer, to the show. Thank you for coming, Paul. Now, I've watched your video, and you gave so much information. I think we're going to have to do like 2-3 shows, because one show we could just cover politics and Daniel Smith. But in 1603, Queen Elizabeth I, let's start right there where it all began, where we lost our monarch and the usurped throne appointed by God, right? King David was appointed by God in 2 Chronicles 5:2, I believe. Let's see, my memory, I like to use the Geneva Bible, which King James burned them all. Like he burned, can you believe that? He burned the Geneva Bible. I wonder what he was afraid of.
Well, he wasn't as good a person as people think, right? And they use that King James Bible sort of as his claim to fame or his claim to moral purity.
Yeah.
So there's an agenda behind that Bible, definitely.
Yeah. Yep.
So Elizabeth I, she literally was the lawful monarch to reign on the English throne. Everybody thinks her has been a de facto illegitimate usurper king or queen, and they've lacked any lawful authority to actually act in that capacity. So this is something that most people don't realize. It's new to me. This
Hmm.
stuff was all dropped in my lap the last year and a half or so, and I've been digging into it, and it's quite a rabbit hole, I got to tell you, and um, it's not easily understood, and it's not easy to get to the bottom of the rabbit hole, and I don't think it's very well.
Yeah. Well, James took over. James won. Um, ascended to the throne illegally,
That's correct, yeah.
and then violating the 1351 treason statute.
Well, they did violate the 1351 treason statute, but they also violated the 1547 treason statute, the 1553 treason statute, and the 1559 treason statute.
Oh
And
man.
interestingly enough, that 1559 treason statute was passed by Elizabeth I. And so there's
Right.
these rumors that are spread through movies and upper political circles that Elizabeth I wanted. Is there a feedback in the sound there at all?
Okay. If there is, I don't hear it, but I will fix that right now. It's the headphones.
Sorry, I just
It.
don't want people to be spoiled.
How does that?
Yeah, it's good now. So anyway, so with Elizabeth I, there's these rumors that she wanted James I to succeed her, and on her deathbed she had made some confession of, put James on the throne. But this is absolute nonsense. She passed a treason statute in 1559, just 4 years before her death, that said if anybody violated the succession statutes that her father, King Henry VIII, had put in place, that they would suffer death for treason. So there's absolutely no basis to those rumors or stories. And this is all just stuff, propaganda that's spread around in order to legitimize James I, all these successful monarchs since that they're not so that
Okay.
so yeah, there's when they put James I on the throne, uh, everybody involved in that should have lost their heads for treason,
Yeah, that's the way it was done those days.
right? Not that I endorse that per se, but
No, no, me neither. You have like a 50-page document just documenting everything.
oh, I have more than that. So I've been working nonstop for about the last year to get to the bottom of this. And at first, I didn't think that there would be any validity to this. I've had third parties telling me, I got to look down this avenue and this avenue to to figure out what's going on. And they said, oh, there's something to this. You really need to look into it. And so I actually have quite a bit written out documenting this stuff. So I've got uh, I've got this master volume here. It's got a nice little cross on it for the English throne. But this has got everything in there that I need to be able to prove everything that I'm saying. And then I've got auxiliary documents, like I've got this here, which is lawful succession to the English crown, and going from Magna Carta to Henry VIII to Elizabeth I to our present day. I've got another document here. Um, Notice of constitutional defect, lack of jurisdictional authority, and ultra vires governance in Canada. Right? Like there's a lot of branches that this information goes into, and so I'm only maybe halfway there. And in fact, I keep revising these documents. So that master book, I've revised it, I don't know, 10 times or so, and I'm in the process of revising it again. So, but yeah, there's a lot of information here. So I'm not even really quite sure where to start, except maybe we should start back at Magna Carta.
Yeah, yeah, that's the best.
Okay,
A-
cool.
And
Well,
we'll move forward.
so Magna Carta was originally an agreement between King John Lackland and his lords, and the story goes that he was sleeping with all of having affairs with all of his lord's wives and stuff, and they were, they wanted to put an end to this, and so they wanted to constrain the king, and so they basically threatened to wage war against him if he didn't sign this Magna Carta. So he did sign it under duress, and obviously, as soon as he had signed it, and the situation was diffused, he immediately repudiated it and said, "No, no, no, that's I signed it under duress. That's not going to." So, but King John died a year later from dysentery, and then his son was on the throne, Charles. Oh, I don't have that in front of me. Charles II, I believe it is. It gets complicated with all these names, and they all use the same name and stuff, right? So it gets a little bit confusing. But I have lists of this stuff here. Actually, I might have it here. John Henry King Henry the Third. King Henry the Second. Henry the Third, I think. Anyways, you see it in the third and second. So his son gets on the throne, and he reestablishes the Magna Carta in 1225. There's a few reiterations of it, but it eventually passes in final form in 1225. And it's this agreement between the crown and the lords, basically an agreement that the realm is going to be bound by law, and they have certain stipulations in that agreement. I'm just trying to find. It was Henry the Third. Sorry. So, anyways, so the underlying principle behind the Magna Carta is that it bound the crown to operate under the law, and that's reflected in the very first section there, I believe it is, clause 1, right? Says the English church shall be free, but the inference, if you continue in that section, is that all the realm shall be bound to the law. And then clause 39 says, no free man shall be seized, imprisoned, dispossessed, outlawed, or exiled, nor will we proceed against him except by the lawful judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. And then clause 40, to no one will we sell, to no one deny or delay right or justice. And so this is establishing that the realm of England is going to be ruled by law, not just arbitrary exercise of power.
Yeah.
This was to, put a stop to King John's antics. But Charles III passed this for political reasons, to get support and to strengthen his position. So the Magna Carta was basically the basis by which King Henry VIII created his succession statutes. And under the premise that the realm is bound by law, he passed these succession statutes through Parliament, enacting them as law. And so not only are those succession statutes given force by the fact that they're passed through Parliament, but they're given force by the fact that Magna Carta establishes that the realm will be ruled in this order, right, by this law. And everybody's agreed to this, both the crown and the people, right? So there's nobody that can say, well, we're not in agreement with this. So when he passes those succession statutes, this is the supreme law of the land, because it's passed by decree of the king, basically through Parliament. And so let's just discuss Parliament for a second. So today, what we see as Parliament is not what Parliament actually is. This is a perversion what we see today.
Yep.
So back in the day, the king, he was the sovereign, right? He owned all the land. Everybody served under or submitted to his authority. And Parliament basically was an agreement between the people and the king. So the king would say, I want to pass this law, whatever it was. And then he would summon Parliament. So Parliament was not able to convene itself. It had to be summoned by the king. So he would summon Parliament and say, "This is what I want for a law," and he would present it to them. And then their job was to represent the people, or the basically the lords. It wasn't quite so equitable for the people, but so their job was to represent the people and come to a compromise or an agreement that worked for both sides, right? And
Yep.
when the king finally was happy with it, they would pass it through Parliament, and then he would sign off on it and give it royal assent. And without his signature, it meant nothing, right? There was no agreement. And so when he signs that document that gives royal assent, that means the Parliament has agreed to it, they passed it, the king has now signed it. It now becomes established law of the land, right? And
Yep.
this is by
Yep.
royal decree, basically. And then when the king didn't need the Parliament, he just dismissed them. And there were long periods of time where Parliament was never convened, like 10, 15 years, no Parliament, because there was no need for them, because they weren't passing any laws, right? So and typically, it was used to enact like tax laws and stuff, right? So the king would want to go on some military campaign, and he'd need to impose a tax, and so they had to come to with an agreement between the people and the king to institute this tax. So that being said, the succession statutes were an agreement between the lords that represented the people and the king, and it was given sovereign assent and passed as law. And so, and in those succession statutes were provisions like they were enforced through treason. So the Succession Act would say, we established this as succession, and if you violate that, this is considered treason. Blah blah blah. I mean, that's the summary of it without getting into the actual succession statutes, which they're not really that long,
Mm-hmm.
but the it's hard to keep all this stuff in my head even. So like when I've got this stuff written out, it's easier just to reference it. And I do have
Absolutely.
it here. So, and this is kind of the point of putting all this on paper, right? So that this is a legal argument. It's completely factual. It's defensible, and you can vet it yourself by going and researching it, right? Once you have this information here that I'm putting together. So, the first Succession Act, basically, so there's a whole story behind all of this stuff, right? This is why nobody could figure this stuff out. Um, like this is well hidden, but I've
Yes,
understood it here.
and
So
for a very long time.
yeah, right. Well, I mean, 400 years, and we've had 400 years of imposter kings.
Yeah, wait till we get to Canada.
Yeah, well, and 400 years of them building the New World Order is basically what's been happening here,
Yep.
or 300 anyway, since William III. So Henry VIII had 6 wives, right? And he had 3 children, all from different wives. And now I can't even remember off the top of my head the order of this, how this goes. But so Mary was his eldest daughter, and then Elizabeth, and then Edward, his son. And I believe it was Mary's mother was executed for adultery, or so the story goes, right? And so he then had remarried, and he had his second daughter, Elizabeth. And so what he did was the first succession statute was to renounce Mary from being a successor to the throne and to establish Elizabeth as the lawful successor to the throne. And that was pretty much the extent of it. But it established the fact that the king was able to use a parliamentary statute to dictate succession to the throne. And again, by Magna Carta, this was all being done by law, which was what Magna Carta required. And so the king was taking succession that was typically before that kind of a hodgepodge of rules and approved by Parliament, stuff like this, to determine succession. And he's now turning this into succession statute, actual parliamentary law, right? So the Second Succession Act, he now he's got his third child, Edward, and so now in the Second Succession Act, he prevents both Mary and Elizabeth from succeeding onto the throne and establishes Edward as the successor to the throne. But in the Second Succession Statute, they established that future succession will be established by the future last will and testament of the king or by his letters patent, and that this will, by law, determine the succession to the statute. So everything's being turned into law here now for succession. And then we get to the Third Succession Statute, and by this time, he's close to dying. Like, he's an old man now, right? And he's got a leg infection from fighting in war, and so he now, in the Third Succession Statute, says, okay, all three of my children are going to succeed to the throne, but he specifies the order, right? So Edward first, because he's a male child, then Mary, and then Elizabeth. And then he says that any additions to that will be done through the, if I remember correctly here, will be done through the last will and testament or the letters patent. Because he anticipated now the fact that perhaps all three of them would not produce any heirs. Edward was kind of a sickly boy from his youth, right? So, and he died when he was 14 or 15, right? So it was kind of expected, right? So he put in contingent heirs or provisions for contingent heirs, and then in his last will and testament, he stipulates that line of succession will be Edward first, Mary second, Elizabeth third, and then he names the two daughters of his younger sisters. So Henry VIII had two sisters. He had Margaret was his older sister, and she married James IV of Scotland, becoming the Queen of Scotland. And he had his younger sister, Mary Tudor, who she had married the French King Louis IV, but he died. He was an old man, so he died, and she never had any children. So she remarried this guy named Charles Brandon. And so when he's writing all this stuff, she's married to Charles Brandon. She's got two daughters through Charles Brandon, and so he named those two daughters from his younger sister Mary as successors after Elizabeth I, and that's Lady Frances Brandon, and then lastly Lady Eleanor Brandon. Now, and it stipulates that it's to their body of heirs, so it's not just specifically to them, but to all of the heirs that come from them afterwards, right? So this effectively eliminates Margaret Tudor and the Scottish line from ever inheriting the English throne, because the body of heirs would have to become extinct before it would then transfer back to the open line, right?
Yes.
So have I lost you yet?
No. Well, you're talking about a usurped throne already, right? So he's
No,
making
not yet.
laws.
We haven't got there yet.
Okay.
So we're just establishing that King Henry VIII had determined succession to the crown by statute and
But
by last will and testament.
One thing I would add is it has to go from father to son, according to the patriarch. So he can't hand it to his daughter. It would have to go back. If his son died, it would have to go back through the line, find the next in line, and go to him. So so that's a problem there, right?
Well, it's not, but it is. Like, I mean, this is a common misconception and a belief that even myself, I had that, right? I'm like, well, this can't be because of all these different reasons, right? But the more I dug into it, I was like, wow, like, there's a story here. And so you're correct. Prior to Henry VIII, the general rules of male preference primogeniture inheritance was that it would go through the senior line, but male first, right? So only males could actually claim the throne.
Yeah, the Y-DNA, right back to King David, King Solomon, appointed by God. And, that's what I want. I want, the appointed back. Now, we have a question. If you might have to put your finger on where you are on the book in the book.
Oh, that's
Let's
fine. Go ahead.
see.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
So the question is, how could the topic change the game in play today by those with generational commitment and the monopoly on violence?
Oh, well, that's kind of the culmination of this whole story here, because there is a solution to this new world order, and it is restoring the lawful king to the crown of
Yes.
England, right?
Yep. Which is what I want.
Yeah, I think everybody does, right? Like I'll tell you straight up, I'm sick and tired of these parasites running this world, and they need to go.
Yeah, like King Charles is an imposter.
Exactly, he's not the king of England.
And he's a very bad king with a clock that's going backwards that will go to 2030. So that's kind of scary, intimidating. You own nothing and be happy. I mean, that sounds like some kind of drugging, and so everyone's just walking around in bliss, on a drug-induced happiness. But the mRNA technology can affect people's emotions. So this could be how they make us happy, just with that technology.
Well,
So okay,
Charles III he's as evil as Klaus Schwab.
yeah.
Like they
Remember
hide
his,
behind this
and he
persona that the
and he
monarchy it represents purity, but in fact these are
no way.
evil, right?
But look
Uh,
at Seville. He's best friends with that Seville guy who was into dead people. I mean, he was a very dark soul. Oh my god!
right, and then
And he
I
had
mean, oh, sorry, go
and
ahead.
he had a talk show with kids in it. Like oh
Yeah, and then there's Prince Andrew, right, and the Epstein
oh
thing,
yes,
right?
yep.
Like, I mean,
Oh god!
and
But
who's covering up for him, Charles?
after 50 years, they have a jubilee. They're supposed to forgive all debt and share the wealth that they accumulated in 50 years with all the Commonwealth, all the people. They never did that. Queen Elizabeth didn't do that. And she vowed that when she ascended to the throne, before God.
Yeah.
And then
Well, did she?
after her jubilee, nobody got a nickel. Did you get a check?
No, but did she ascend the throne?
No, she didn't.
Right. So like, and this is where so if we just back up and we get back to your question about the male inheriting the crown, right?
Right.
Because it's so easy to go off topic, and we'll never get the structure established, right? But so in the male preference primogeniture inheritance, it's you determine seniority through the senior lines,
Yep.
and then you pick the male out of each senior line, right? And so if
Yep.
there's no male to be taken out of that senior line, then you transfer the next senior collateral branch until you can find a male to pick out and sit on the throne, right? This never really been an issue because every king's always had a son to replace him with. But what happened was that because Henry VIII was fundamentally changing the way succession operated, right? He was using Magna Carta, the principles of Magna Carta, which everybody had agreed to. He was using Parliament, and he was passing succession statutes to dictate the succession of the crown, which he had the sovereign ability to do as the reigning king, right? It wasn't like he was just some guy off in left field trying to make something up. This is the sitting king saying, "I'm going to determine who's going to sit on my throne after me."
Mm-hmm.
So this is acceptable on that standard. And after he passed these succession statutes, he had altered that male preference primogeniture rule, but only temporarily. And this is what people missed, because so he dictated that his two daughters would sit on that throne, right? The only way that they could sit on that throne was through the basis of those succession statutes. If you take away those succession statutes, they have no claim to the throne, right? So their whole reign was contingent upon those succession statutes. But Henry VIII dictated that it would be Edward and then Mary and then Elizabeth. And then he said, to the body of heirs of Lady Frances Brandon and Lady Eleanor Brandon, which meant that when it got to Lady Frances and Lady Eleanor, which they were actually dead by the time Elizabeth's rule finished, that would then revert back to the male preference primogeniture, meaning that the male would have to inherit the crown, because he wasn't stipulating that females would continue reigning. He only stipulated his two daughters to reign, right? And then after that, he said to the body of heirs, so it automatically reverts back to the male preference, right? So within those lines, it has to be a male that takes to the throne. So so that's an interesting point that actually it just kind of came to light to me here in the last month or so, and I was like, wow, that's interesting, because when you look at the last 400 years, there was like Queen Anne, and you've got Queen Elizabeth, and I don't know how many female kings or queens, sorry, that we've had since then.
Oh, that's a good question, Anthony. My guess, I have a question for you. Sorry if I
No, go ahead.
distract your
No, that's fine.
thinking. Now, the kings have a perceived power to control things, but are there people controlling them?
Well, see, since 1603, they have perverted the crown itself, and they've inverted it. So now they have Parliament controlling the king rather than the king controlling Parliament, and they did that through the removal of Charles I when they murdered the king and replaced him 12 years later, I think it was, with Charles II, which was his son. And then in 1688 to 89, they deposed the king. Well, they didn't. They just the king ran off, and then they put William III on the crown, or on the throne. Sorry. But there's issues with that too. I should just leave this over because I keep having to refer to these names. There's so many of them, right? It's hard to keep track of who's who. But so in where are we here? In 1688, it was where are we? 88.
So good.
We are James II. Yeah, James II, right? So James II basically he just got out of Dodge for his own personal safety. He didn't actually renounce the throne or anything like that. He just left England and went over to France for personal safety. And then Parliament decided they were going to replace him with William III. But if we back up, so in 1603, the Privy Council and Parliament, some actors in Parliament, orchestrate the succession of James I onto the English throne in complete violation of the succession statutes, right? So first of all, Parliament has to be summoned by a lawful king. So in 1603, the succession statute stipulated that after Elizabeth's death, it would go to the heirs of Lady Frances Brandon and then Lady Eleanor Brandon. However, Elizabeth I, during her reign, had deemed the heirs of, basically, in summary, it's a long story, the heirs that came from Lady Frances Brandon were either extinct or extinguished by being declared illegitimate by Elizabeth I. So her entire body of heirs was um, irrelevant. And so it fell in 1603. The claim fell to Lady Eleanor Brandon's body affairs, and her grandson at that time, the senior heir within her body, was a fellow by the name of William Stanley, and he was the sixth Earl of Derby, and also the Lord of Man. And so that's who should have been put on the throne in 1603, according to law, according to the succession statutes, which everybody's bound under, according to Magna Carta, everybody's bound to the rule of law. And so they didn't. They put James I on the throne. So this is a violation of the 1351 treason statute, which is to pass an heir to the throne. It's a violation of the 47, the 53, and 59 statutes, which explicitly say that if you violate those succession statutes, if you prevent somebody from succeeding to the throne that's lawfully entitled to, or if you put somebody else on the throne that's not entitled to by those succession statutes, and they explicitly name King Henry VIII succession statutes, that is treason, right? So James and everybody who helped him should have been executed for treason, but they didn't. So James gets on this throne. They run this big propaganda machine to legitimize him. William Stanley basically, he's not going to say anything because he's probably going to end up dead if he does, right? His sister, Lady Elizabeth Stanley, and her husband, they flee to Ireland as soon as they put James on the throne. So, they're getting as far away as possible, and it's all for their personal safety, right?
Yeah.
So when we get from James I, his successor comes from the Stuart line. So James I is a Stuart, right? Scottish Stuart. All of his successors after him are Stuarts. And so the next one on the throne is his son. And we get to Charles I, which is successor through the Stuart line. But they're not lawful kings because they never met the criteria under the succession statute. So these are all just imposters, one after the other, right? And so when we get to Charles I in 1640, I believe, or something like that. Actually, I don't have that in front of me here. But what is it? Yeah, no, 1659, 58, 59. The Parliament decides that they're going to execute their king because they don't like what he's doing. Now,
holy,
how does Parliament hold the power or authority to do that? They just simply don't, right? So,
yeah,
under the treason statutes, like if you were to go on the premise that these guys are legitimate kings, the treason statutes would have determined that to be treason, right? What Parliament did to depose Charles I, that would be treason. They're acting against the king, right? But technically, Charles I's not a king, so technically they're not committing treason, right? And I believe this is how they kind of got away with this stuff. But the public perception was that this is a legitimate king. Parliament now concocted this authority to depose its own king, which is ridiculous. And so murdered Charles I, and then they controlled Parliament through this Richard Cromwell guy for the next 12 or 11 years. And then they put Charles I's son, when he became of age, onto the throne and continued on. But what they had done is they had set a precedent that Parliament had powers that it never possessed, and still to this day does not. But they exercised those illegitimate powers. So they set that precedent. Then we fast forward to 1688, and James II leaves England for his own personal safety. And what they did then was that they now Parliament saying not only can we depose a king, but we're going to declare this king, null and void, and we're going to choose our own king, and Parliament's going to choose who goes on the throne. right? And so then after that, they later passed more de facto statutes saying that Parliament now has the ability to choose who could be king based on their religious denomination and their their political leniencies and stuff. And so they were now creating criteria that a person had to meet in order to even be considered to be appointed as a king by Parliament. Like, this is just absolute nonsense, and none of it because in 1603, Elizabeth I died. They violated the succession statutes, and everybody who sat on that throne since is illegitimate. And further to that, every piece of paper that has been pushed through the English Parliament, later turned into the British Parliament, has never received lawful royal assent because there's been no lawful king to sit on the throne to sign the papers, right? So it's all just a bunch of hogwash. It at face value, it has the appearance of legality, but when you get into the legal argument behind this stuff, it and you apply the law to this, it completely falls apart. And interestingly enough, like, so when you try explaining that, like, that's just like, that's an overload of information, right? But automatically people say, now I've kind of lost my thought there. People say, well, you know, they've done this for 400 years, so it's legitimate, right? And like, they just decided they were doing something different. And here's the deal: if they had changed the order of things by military force, right? So this goes back to the military conquest thing, where you can, if you defeat a king in battle, then you become the legitimate king in replacement, right? Because you killed the king, you've taken over, right? The spoils of war, right? Victor takes all. But that never happened with all of this stuff. What they did was they completely broke the parliamentary laws in place, and they continued functioning through this parliamentary system and this monarchical system that was in place. Nobody waged war to change anything. So they literally were just breaking the law and committing treason.
Yep. Yeah, and yeah, I've been, like I said, studying this, and the lineage of King David was cursed by God. It was a throne that had conditions, and they breached those conditions. The covenant they made, and that was that. Then we had to go back and find the next heir. But it's very complicated because a lot of time has passed, so a lot of people have been born and died, and it's very complex. But I mean, here's a map here of the lineage of Zerah and Phares. The royal house of Phares, goes down to Judah, and then Phares, and then King Solomon, Zedekiah, and on the other side, royal house of Judah, line of Zerah. You got Judah, Zerah, Cretan kings, Trojan kings, Frankish kings, and then Merovingians. I don't know if I said that right. Merovingians. To the tribe of Judah. So the Carolingians, they are King Charles line, right? They're illegitimate. They have no right to the throne. But I think he's the Rothschilds, like got breeding rights to enter into the royal bloodline.
That's what I hear.
They're so, oh my God, they're so dirty.
So what I hear is that Charles isn't even from that Stuart line, right?
No, they changed their last name. There's a big red flag for me. Why would a king, why would the royal family change their last name unless they're illegitimate? I mean, it's just common sense to me, right?
Well, there is, like, I mean, there is ways that the names can change, but the lineage stays intact. And
right.
But what I hear is that, according to your thing about the breeding rights, is that they're not of the actual lineage that they claim.
Yeah.
right,
And they're actually not even Rothschild; they're Bauer family.
right, yeah.
So even they changed their name. I mean, everybody changed their name.
Well, see, I
Even
can't prove that though, right? So I try not to go down that stuff too much. I'm sticking strictly to the
yeah,
legal situation
no,
that we have with the laws
absolutely.
passed and everything, right?
Absolutely, because it's documented and provable, and that's
Exactly.
what we need to work with
Yeah, well, you,
100%.
you got to work with the facts, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of could be's in life, but if you can't prove it, whether or not it's true or not, it's kind of irrelevant, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Have you guys worked out those lines back to King David? Because what I'm working with is strictly the main English line that comes from King Cerdic down to
Well,
present day. But I do have, like, I've got a whole bunch of lists where I go down different branches, and I do have a list where I descend back to the Merovingian kings, and according to
yeah.
your picture there, those Merovingian kings you say can be traced back to King David. Is that true?
Well, yeah, through Judah. Let me see here. Yeah, but we also, studied all the lines, just to be more efficient in track and trace. That's what
Right.
we've been doing. And it's very complex because of what you've been talking about. And then we have Genghis Khan and the Mongols. That's another story right there. Oh, I keep double clicking by accident. Okay, here we go. Yeah, Genghis Khan, the founder of the Mongol Empire, and they did the same thing with the breeding. They started breeding, um, and that's how they got their way into the Jewish line, and it's just crazy. But there's so much history that we've never been told. It's not taught in school. They just got everyone graduating with blindfolds like horses. They could only see forward. So that's
Well,
what we're doing right now. Is we're filling in that whole range of information, trying not to be overwhelming, but but it's important. It needs to be said. It needs to be archived, uh, and so you can go back to it and take notes if you have to. And because we're on a mission, a really a righteous mission from the Creator to find the real King. We already know we have a fake. We have an imposter, so we know that. So the next thing is finding the next in line, legitimate, just to respect our Creator and what our Creator wants.
we'll see.
And
And this is what's so interesting is that we can do both of those things, right?
mhm,
Like I can prove for an absolute fact under law that Charles III is illegitimate, and everyone before him, tracing back all the way to 1603, and that Elizabeth I was the last lawful monarch to sit on that throne,
mhm, yep,
meaning that the lawful title to the crown lies elsewhere. And if we follow those succession statutes, we can follow the lineage to present day and identify the specific person who has claim to that throne. And that just happens to be held by my family, ironically enough, which is what was behind me digging into this stuff in the first place. So I had family members come to me and say, "Look, here's our lineage," and at face value, I said, "Well, even if that's true, it makes for a nice story, like, oh, we're related to some royalty or something like that, right?" But I'm like, I didn't see how there was any way that we had any claim to the throne. And so as I kept digging into it, I kept expecting to find a dead end and be like, okay, yeah, end of story. It's a nice little thing to put on your wall and say, hey,
mhm.
friends come over. Hey, guess what? I'm related to so and so, right? I never ever expected to get to where I am now, where I can prove for an absolute fact, that my family holds claim to that throne.
And
It
the beast doesn't take the throne by war. and inherits it through fraud.
Right? That's what's happened, right? They've usurped the throne. They've taken what belongs to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so just a little bit of backstory on myself. Like I, I, over the years, like I've never liked the monarchy, because you see what it represents and stuff, and it's never worked to help the people. It's just a control system that's been implemented, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like I was fundamentally opposed to this. But then when I realized what the possibilities that are behind, having a claim to this crown, if it's somebody with good moral character, uh, the the possibilities are limitless, right? Like, I mean, you saw Trump go over and party with the royals there a couple months back, and they had that big golden table, right? Pure gold. This thing is like half a mile long. It's pure gold. Everything's gold. It's gold everywhere, right? Like they're just living in lavish gold, in a gold world. And that to me is reprehensible. Like I think that's just sickening. You've got
Mm-hmm.
people in England living on the street, can't feed themselves, and you got these parasites eating off this gold table like that. Like,
Yeah.
not in my world, not in my world, right? So, if you were to get a person with good moral character onto that throne, not only would the world be turned upside down, but a lot of good things would happen, right? And the world doesn't really need to be turned upside down, actually.
No.
That
No.
and that's a whole nother conversation, I guess. Like I say, I mean, this information just branches off in so many different directions, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but like I have an entire legal argument put together, right here, that shows how the system that's been built since 1603 lawfully belongs to the true crown prior to 1603. And so basically, the structures that you see today don't have to be like smashed and torn down, but they are required under law to submit to the true sovereign authority, right? And then that
Yep.
sovereign authority can then take action to clean up this mess, right? Go inside and start kicking people out, holding people accountable, and start changing the way things are done, to
Mm-hmm.
benefit people, right? Because if we get into the the whole premise that kings rule by the grace of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that means there's no king that's actually, earthly king that's sovereign, right? They are subject to the King of Kings. And when we get into the legality of Jesus dying on the cross, it's quite interesting, because it is a legal argument. So Jesus died on the cross, and with his blood, he purchased the souls of all mankind, right? And through that blood, he is able to redeem man and mankind, I should say. So so legally, when Jesus died on the cross, he purchased us with his blood. He used his blood as the currency to purchase us, which means he legally owns each and every one of us. Whether we submit or not is irrelevant. He owns all of mankind that he purchased with his blood, right? And he's also the King of Kings. So that means that every man, woman, and child is a subject under Jesus' kingly sovereign authority, right? Which means that we're all his property. So if you have an earthly king, his he's not a sovereign king. He's simply an administrator for the King of Kings. And so he is taking care of the belongings of the master, right? And so if he's abusing the subjects under the earthly realm, then he's abusing Jesus' belongings, right? And this is where you need somebody with moral character to sit in that chair, because if not, they just do whatever they want, and
Well, this is where it gets complicated because the Talmud says they stoned Jesus to death. The Quran says
Mm,
he was never crucified. He went up and joined God. You know, same as Enoch, that he never died. So we have three conflicting stories here, and because that I like to research, so I read the Bible, the Quran, the Talmud, the Gita, I'm everywhere because I want to hear what everyone has to say. I think that's the best way to be. Now this picture here shows all the Y-DNA line of King Charles from Pepin,
mm,
and it also shows the three popes. There's four popes. Most people don't know that. The red pope is from the Philippines, and he's the what do you call it? The media guy. You know, the gender pronouns, LGBT, the same-sex marriage. That's who the red pope. That's what he represents. The white pope we all know. The gray pope is the Rothschild, um, uh, Pepe Orsini. The black pope is the Jesuit military arm of the Vatican, uh, Otoro Sosa. They're all Carolingian Empire, the Carolingian Empire. That's who we're ruled by right now. Just so everyone knows, it shows the line and how the Charles line, and that's just part of my research. But now it's archived. Now it's there for everyone to see. And another thing is that Joseph was the one that came from the David line, and he wasn't the father of Jesus, so Jesus wouldn't inherit that throne because of that. He would be like an adopted son, or Also, the Talmud says Mary had sex with one of the soldiers, and that's where Jesus came from. That's his legitimate father, going totally against the Bible, of course. But I still want to hear what everyone has to say, whether they're telling the truth or lying. Because these are a lot of people that believe this thing. Like Christians, a lot of Christians in this world believe what that book says. And so that's why I wanted to read all of them. So, to the other researchers, Jesus is illegitimate. He's an adopted son. He has no throne. He wasn't crucified. So, who's lying? Someone's lying, right?
yeah, and that's a whole loaded rabbit hole there. Like, I mean,
Yep.
but I will tell you this, right? Like, I mean, I cannot read Latin, and
Hmm.
I cannot read Greek, and I cannot read Hebrew. So the scrolls, I'm relying on a third party to translate them and interpret them into an
Hmm.
English Bible, right? And even at that, I all I can go off of is the Bible that's put in front of me. I can't like I don't know if there's more to the story or if it's been rewritten. I just
Hmm.
don't know, right? And I'm not here to speculate if it is A or B or Z. I'm pointing out the fact that I don't know these things for an absolute fact, right?
Hmm.
So like if we were to go on a tour into the basement of the Vatican, what would we find there? Would we find portions of the Bible that have you know what I mean?
Well,
Um, I'm just
luckily,
right.
luckily, luckily, I can show where these things are. I'm not just gonna just spout them out. So here it is in Arabic, right? And then it says, as for and for, they're saying, indeed, we have killed the Messiah, Jesus, the son of Mary, the Messiah of Allah, the messenger of Allah, and they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but was made to resemble him to them. So they're saying a fake Jesus was crucified that look like him. And
Mhm.
indeed, those who differ over it are in doubt about it. They have no knowledge of it except the following of assumption, and they did not kill him for certain.
Hmm.
So, look at that. That's the Quran, you know. So that's
Yeah.
one perspective. So I have to consider it. It doesn't mean
Well,
I believe it, but it is said, it's in a holy book, and it's worthy of at least listening and contemplating. That's what we have to have an open mind about these things, because we already know the throne itself has been usurped. So,
well, yeah, but I mean, then like we're like this, we're like we're just diving down rabbit
mm,
holes because like now then we have to go into the whole thing of is the
yeah.
Quran a Bible book, and there's issues with that book itself too, right?
Well, I
And
mean,
I will
yeah,
state this that
there
there's only
is.
one book known to mankind, to the general population, that makes the claim that it is written, or I should say, inspired by God, right? And that's the
Hmm.
Holy Scriptures. So, but I believe that
King James edited the Bible, took out the apocryphas. The Ethiopian Bible has all the apocryphas in there. So what
right,
did he take out? What did he change? So he's got us. Why does all the other religions hate Christians? Because they worship idols. Jesus. They pray to Jesus instead of praying to God. They pray to Mary. The first commandment says don't have any graven images. What do we have in all the churches? Graven images. So we're violating the first commandment by default by being a Catholic or a Christian, and you're not supposed to have any images of dead like tattooed on your body. I mean, there's I I have faith in the Bible, and I love all my books. I'll be honest. I love it for just for the wealth of knowledge, and even though they oppose each other, I my faith is very strong, and I can see the lies and the truth. Like like the Talmud, I know it's not appropriate or okay to procreate with a 3-year-old. It's just
right,
not appropriate. So this is a patriotic, demented, evil men inserting themselves into a holy book. So this is a big problem for me.
yes, and the books lose all credibility, at that point,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
there's always, I don't know, like it's like all I can say to people is that you need to question everything, right? That doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
that you believe everything, but
Yep.
definitely. So one of the lessons I learned in life is that, like for instance, I got baptized as one of Jehovah's Witnesses when I was younger, and I was in that religion for almost 20 years. Um, but halfway through, I kind of was like, "There's something wrong here, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
these people are a little like things aren't adding up." And but if you're in one of these religions, and there's a lot of other religions too. It's not just the JWs. I mean, there's a lot of cult like organizations out there,
Yep.
and they indoctrinate their members to believe that religion is the only way to salvation. And I'm not saying that there's like multiple ways to salvation. What I'm trying to say is that I eventually came to understand that a lot of the foundational doctrines that were being taught by the Jehovah's Witnesses were in fact false, and the scriptures did not support what they were teaching. Um, and I'm not going to get into what that is exactly, but there's a number of things that are foundational to their religion that does not match the scriptures. And so, if you're a Jehovah's Witness and you are indoctrinated, you are led to believe that you're correct and everybody else is wrong. And this is a fundamental mistake that most people make, whether they're a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon or any other Protestant styled religion. Is that you automatically believe that everybody else is wrong, and this is this prevents you from looking at things analytically. It prevents you from looking at things objectively. And
Yep.
so end up in a situation where you're just dismissing things out of this. Basically, it's kind of like a prideful attitude that you know better, right? And I'll state for the fact,
Yes.
like I don't know, I know less, or I know that I know that I don't know more than what I do know, right? So, and I think we all need to humble ourselves that way. And so, the only source of true knowledge is God Himself, right? And
Yeah.
I don't have that knowledge, so I'm working with what I do have. And so this is where, again, like I say, there's a lot of rabbit holes we can go down and stuff, but I trying to stick with the facts of what is provable at this point in time. If we were to get into the basement of the Vatican or the Smithsonian Institute or any of these other vaults where they've got all these things stored down there, perhaps the facts would change, right? I don't know. We don't have access to that. So, but it is curious. Like it's abundantly clear that what we've been given as our Bible is right. Like somebody's making a decision. Oh, we can release this, but not that, right? Like you brought up, like the apocrypha and stuff, right? And so there's a group of men that are deciding what you can and can't do.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. Who's telling the truth, right? And you have to kind of use your own discernment to be able to determine. Now, here is the Talmud, Sanhedrin 43a, verse 20. On Passover Eve, they hung the corpse of Jesus the Nazarene after they killed him by way of stoning, because he practiced sorcery, incited people to idol worship, and led the Jewish people astray. So, this is another perspective. But, that's where I'm saying there's, truth and lies in everything. I think that's the way the Jesuits have done it. They have in the Quran, there's truth and there's lies. That's what I see. King James, there's truth and there's lies. Because it says to stone your child if if they're disobedient. No, 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 no. Don't go kill your kids. And Leviticus is bad too. I mean, that's what the government of Canada has wanted to ban is Leviticus.
Yeah.
And I know why. I know why. Because we don't want to go kill our kids because they're disobedient. God have the schools are making them disobedient. They're
No.
because they're giving them gender pronouns with benefits. So self entitlement is being bred, and they're weaponizing these kids, making them violent, demanding you get their gender pronoun correct. It's a violent, foul, anti-God agenda that's happening right now, and most people in Canada, hold on to that. The what is it? The Canada rights. What the hell is that?
Like the Charter of Rights.
The Charter of Rights, this 1867 BNA Act.
Yeah, well, that doesn't actually exist. And so, you brought up Gordon at the very beginning, right?
Yes.
I've spoken to Gordon, and I would like to state on the record, like, what Doug Force and these guys uncovered is 100% factually correct within the de facto system. If you only go back to 1867, if you assume that the current monarchy is completely 100% legit, but the problem is that they're not legit. And so it undoes even the 1931 statute. So even though they're correct about all of that stuff, it's irrelevant because there's a deeper deception going on here. And that's where, I'm not like, because there's a couple guys in that 31 freedom movement that they don't like me because I'm pulling the rug out from underneath them, right?
Yeah.
And I understand, like, it's like I've been there. When the rug gets pulled out, it's not a very comfortable feeling, right? But
Not only are we both Paul, but we're like two peas in a pod. I knew damn well as soon as I started reading this stuff that I was isolating myself. And it was very lonely in the truth.
Well, only for a while though, right? Eventually people are gonna clue in. The problem that we have with this though, like I mean, and even the Myth is Canada guys, they run into the same problem. Like to explain to have people understand what you're trying to explain, it's very difficult because it's a long story. There's a lot of different pieces of legislation involved, and you have to understand how law works. Like it's not just like a Jack and Jill went up the hill kind of story, right? This is a very in-depth legal argument, and then when you go back to 1603, it gets a little bit deeper even, and you have
Yep.
to start researching history and stuff, right? So, and a lot of this information is not accessible. Like for instance, those succession statutes are not publicly available through the UK Parliament. You have to obtain them through third-party sources. So, like, because they're hiding this stuff, right? They don't want people to see this stuff and figure it out.
No. But I mean, Gordon was right, but he just didn't go far enough.
Yeah, no, he's not wrong,
Yeah.
and and what they're saying is valid because, like, even if you accept that the monarchy today is legitimate, there's not legitimate under the 1931 statute, right? Like in Canada, anyways, right? Within all the dominions. So like these parasites have no argument whatsoever here in Canada. They're just completely legitimate. The technical definition, though, is the 31 stat. What's operating post 1931 is a compounded de facto situation. So
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah. So I mean,
double de
he
facto.
did great. Like his research was good, and he knows a lot of things that many others don't know. So I mean, it is helpful. But yeah, like even that was illegitimate. Like so,
Right.
even though it was said and done, there was no authority behind it.
Yeah. And so the one thing that is kind of the key piece with that 1931 statute. So Gordon and Doug Forst and all these guys, they show how under the de facto system that the de facto crown relinquished the land title to Canada. But when you go back to 1603, there's the Roman maxim of, no, if I can say this correctly, nemo dat qua non habet, which means no one can give what he does not have.
Yeah.
And so under the rules of property, a de facto administration can accrue assets, but they cannot dispense of those assets. So they could build the entire British Empire under this false de facto monarchy, but they're never lawfully or legally allowed to dispense any of it, which means all of it, in the entire British realm, at its maximum size, still to this day legally belongs to the true crown of those heirs of Lady Eleanor Brandon prior to 1603, which is a huge implication, right? Because even if you get into this with the United States, right, everybody says, wow, that doesn't apply to the United States. But actually, it does, because the U.S. did not become independent in 1776. It was 1880 or 1789, I think it was, or 1783, I think, is when the British monarchy signed off to allow the United States to succeed and become the 13 United Colonies, right? But they didn't have the lawful authority under that maxim, nemo dat qua non habet. They did not have the lawful authority to relinquish those assets. And so the U.S., again, this is built under this legal structure. And so the legal structure that they're built under is invalid, which means it doesn't exist in law, right? So the 13 colonies still belong to the true British monarchy, and which is Lady Eleanor's heirs. And because those 13 colonies then accrued assets by establishing the other 50 states, those 50 states as well, all 50 states combined, I should say, lawfully and legally belong to the original crown of 1603. So the U.S. is still a colony of the British monarchy.
The other thing is the Jay Treaty seems to be the only thing keeping us together right now. 1794, which is actually after 1603. So
Exactly. And this is
son
the
of a
problem, right?
bitch, even
Everything
that's not
post
legitimate.
1603 disappears.
Oh my god.
Right. So here's the solution, right? Here's the solution. And we haven't even touched, there's so much more to this story to provide the legal argument behind all this. But here's the solution. Because everything post 1603 is invalid, that means you put that person on the throne of England that has lawful claim under those succession statutes, which just happens to belong to that family. You now have the ability to clean house throughout the Commonwealth nations, right? Including the United States of America, India, South America, South Africa, not South America, sorry, South Africa, I meant to say, Australia, Canada, and the list goes on, right?
And this is why I want the legitimate heir to ascend to this throne, because only that person can legitimately give the sovereignty back to Canada, United States, Australia. You have the ability to, let them be sovereign.
Right. And I will make this oath to the people right now, although I'm not in a position to make that oath yet. But I should be careful how I word this. But me personally, I see the opportunity to protect the people. Right. It's not about becoming Mr. Fat King who's going to eat at a big golden table, right? It's about protecting the people and removing these conflicts from government, correcting the government structure so that it's correct and that it does protect the people, and that the people have the ability to, have grievances addressed instantly and properly. And right now, if you're in the government, if you're part of law enforcement, the list goes on there. You basically have governmental immunity. Like, you can do anything wrong under the sun, and they don't care. They're going to protect you, and the people will suffer. That's just pretty much how the structure is today, right? Under a true king with good moral character, who represents God and God's principles, his prime concern is to protect Jesus' assets or Jesus' belongings, right? Which is the people, and to uphold justice. And we could put an end to human trafficking overnight. We could put an end to organ harvesting, this filth that they're pushing in the schools. We can fix our economies. We can no more homeless people on the streets, no more veterans being, now they're telling the veterans, just go get yourself euthanized so we can harvest your organs and stuff. This is
do something for others.
Yeah,
take this needles to protect your grandmother.
Right, right.
So unbelievable what we went through in the last 5 years.
Yeah, we have the ability to make sure clean water, no more chemicals in our water. The skies are clean. We can fix everything that is wrong. But you need the support of the people. You need some good people. Obviously, a king can't do it all by himself. He needs an army, and he needs I'm not talking, rebellion or anything like this here, but like an army of people, right? He needs that support to make things happen, and he needs people in some high positions of power to start moving. Right?
Well, as you can see, I mean, this is what I have been doing for quite a while now, is searching for the king and documenting the lineage, and so it's kind of amazing that I got to meet you, and we're on the same uh, mission of restoration of God's appointed. And that's, there's a lot of people who made claims. There was this queen, what's her name there? She
Oh,
was
Queen
just
Anna, or whatever her name is. Yeah.
Romana, yes.
You know
Who
what?
was that?
She has quite a few followers. It's quite interesting.
No
Like she's got
kidding.
followers in Iceland and stuff, right? But I kind of like I don't know, but I have some theories of what's going on there. But I don't think it's good.
But I mean,
But
she made the right point. It was, I mean, we have an imposter. So,
well,
I
this is
mean, even
right.
if she was an imposter,
Yeah,
she
yeah.
made she brought it to our attention that there's an imposter, even if it was her.
Well,
She
yeah.
brought
I
it to
mean,
our attention, right?
I think she's just kind of like saying, "Oh, well, it's a free for all, so I might as well declare myself a
Maybe,
leader or whatever." Like
maybe
I don't know. There could be some third party actors behind that whole thing,
that
but
that's true.
but under the succession statutes, and this is established lineage that goes back, 1,500 years, son of son of son of son of son of all the ways back.
Hmm.
That throne succession goes through the line of Lady Eleanor Brandon, and you know what? I'll just read it off for you here, because everybody's like, "Oh, what's the genealogy? What's the genealogy?" Um, and so there's two lines here that need to be expressed. So first of all, like my direct descent, King Henry VII is my 14th great grandfather. So King Henry VII had three children. He had Margaret was his oldest, and then Henry, who became Henry VIII, was the middle child, and then Mary Tudor was the youngest of the three. So my 13th great grandmother is Mary Tudor. And so Mary Tudor had two daughters, right? Frances and Eleanor. And so my 12th great grandmother is Eleanor Brandon. So from Eleanor Brandon, she had a daughter named Margaret, and Margaret Clifford, because Eleanor Brandon married Henry Clifford. So their daughter was Margaret Clifford. Margaret Clifford married Henry Stanley, the fourth Earl of Derby and the Lord of Man. And so their daughter, they had actually 8 children, but in 1603 there was only 2 of them that were alive with any lineage, and the other ones either had died prior to 1603 or their lineage didn't persist for more than a generation or two. And so the only 2 that were available for the throne succession was William Stanley, who should have inherited the throne, and his younger sister, Lady Elizabeth Stanley. Now, my, well, I don't know, was she my 10th great grandmother is Lady Elizabeth Stanley. And so she married a man by the name of Thomas Chidiock. It's actually pronounced Chiddick, but it's spelled Chideock, Chiddick. And they fled to Ireland when James was put on the throne, and they had a son named John Chiddick. And then John Chiddick married Elizabeth Robertson. They had a son named Henry Chiddick. And Henry Chiddick had a bunch of children. But the interesting thing is that Henry Chiddick, he changed the spelling of the last name to Chittick, which is Chitttick. Now, from him, his oldest son was Thomas, which is my I don't know how many grandfathers, but he's my grandfather. And so Thomas had another son named Thomas Chiddick. Thomas had a son named George Chiddick. George had a son named John Chiddick. John Chiddick had another son named John Chiddick. John had a son named William Chiddick. William Chiddick had a son named John Chiddick. John had a son named Walter Chiddick, which is my grandfather. And his eldest child is my mother, Iris Chiddick. And my mother married my father, Manley Fischer, so I have the last name Fischer instead of Chiddick. But I am now 16 lines removed from Henry VII. So that's my lineage. So, and everybody's, concerned about good or not, and I can prove that lineage as well. So, um, but when it comes to the throne succession, so in 1603, Margaret Clifford's oldest son, William Stanley, 6th Earl of Derby, Lord of Man, is the one that the claim passed to. Now, his son was James Stanley, 7th Earl of Derby. James' son was Charles Stanley, the 8th Earl of Derby. Charles' son was William Stanley, the 9th Earl of Derby. He didn't have any sons. He had a daughter named Henrietta Maria Stanley. She was the 4th Baroness Strange. And then she married this guy, John Ashburnham, 1st Earl of Ashburnham. And they had a daughter named Henrietta Bridget Ashburnham. And she died when she was 15 years of age, and that was the end of his line. It became extinct. No blood lineage. So, and that was in 1732 when Henrietta Ashburnham died. So in 1732, the claim then passed to the next senior collateral branch that was alive in 1603, that being Elizabeth Stanley. And Elizabeth Stanley, senior heir at the time of this transfer in 1732, was Henry Chidiock, who changed the spelling of the surname from Chidiock to Chidiock. And so that's how the name happened. So yeah, it's quite interesting. And I'll tell you this, like, not in a million years did I ever expect anything like this to be thrown at me. I always thought I was a nobody. My aspirations in life was, like, if I die an old man and didn't like me.
Well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, like, we're all divine. We're all the chosen ones. We all come from, after the great flood of Noah. So we're all connected. The families have broken and breached, and we do have some negative. I can't believe you saying, Lisa Fraser, that a private investigator investigated Paul. I mean, who does that? She's saying I should have, investigated first.
Who's Lisa Fraser?
She's on my friends list.
I see. She's making
I don't hire in private investigators to investigate my guests. I listen to what they have to say, and I get a vibe. I happen to be looking for the king and the I know we have an imposter, and that's been my quest on the side, other than writing a book, a 3-part series. So is he right? Is he wrong? I don't know. I mean, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. It's archived at least. And this isn't about proving him right or wrong. This is about going through 1603, what happened. We're talking about the monarchy here. We're not talking about just me or Paul. This isn't about our credibility. It's about telling you what happened and things that we don't get taught in school. So I just reject that. I don't think that's very kind, Lisa, to say something like, I usually don't. I just ignore usually negative comments, but I will tell you, I was drawn to Paul. I was drawn to him because I want God's appointed king to, ascend to the throne as God intended. And stealing that throne is really an attack on God. And you can see they're taking God out of school. They took God out of the monarchy. And, the best thing we can do is at least try to unify together and try to never give up. We don't want to give up, even though it's overbearing, overwhelming, and goes back 100 years or hundreds of years that this has been going on. At least now we're knowing the veil is lifting. This is the apocalypse. This is the year of the snake. Until March 31st, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get a lot of information that you've never been told before. And, don't judge the messenger. Don't attack the messenger. You know, hear the message, verify the message. I already know, I do my own work and he aligns with my work. We're divine masculines. We're brothers. We're family. So let's not attack each other. And I can't even believe you would even say that someone investigator after him. My God, man, what is
Well,
that?
well, you know what? It is a fair criticism in some ways, right? Like, I mean, anybody can say anything, right?
Of course.
And so, just so you're aware, this information is being vetted by multiple sources as we speak. It's going to take a long time to get it. No, see, then that's what I'm going to get to.
Yeah, I'll give you your voice, Lisa. I'm not attacking you either. I just feel insulted. You're insulting my guest. You're saying investigator, and so you're saying also that a legitimate king was found in Australia. Forensic evidence. Well, he's also found evidence, and the other guy I'm talking to has found evidence. So we've got so far three potential descendants, and you're saying from the female lineage. That doesn't work. It has to be the Y DNA. It has to be man. It has to be the father to the son. No female can take the throne, okay? Even if you're related. That's not how it works.
So I have actually a picture here. I don't know if I'd be able to share a picture. Or
Yeah,
not.
you can share screen. I'll just stop
Well, just
sharing.
give me a second here. But so if this is the same Lisa Fraser, actually, my memory just jogged. If this is the same Lisa Fraser that I know. She's a friend of a woman by the name of Sarah Nicholson. And Sarah Nicholson has been on a smear campaign for several years to discredit me. About the same time that this information was coming to light about my genealogy, so just take that into into context here. But she makes a valid point, right? So anybody
Sure.
can do anything, right? So there's this guy in Australia that says he's the king, right? And so this is
Yes.
why this information does need to be vetted out.
But it's XY lineage. It doesn't work. It
Right?
can't
But
be
I can.
XY.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it can't be XY. It's a patriarch. It's God's appointed. It goes from father to son to son to son to son. It never goes daughter.
Well,
That you explained why that happened. One
right.
king did it. He made a change and he left to his son, then his two daughters. He wasn't supposed to do that.
Well, so there can only be one claimant, right? Like there's only one senior heir.
Yes.
Like I mean, you can't have two senior heirs. It's just that's not how it works, right?
Yes.
So, um, but there's this guy, Michael Abney Hastings in Australia, that claims that he's the king. He's actually dead now, and so his son is supposed to be the next in line or whatever. But his son doesn't want anything to do with it, and that's because the story is not legit. So the story was simply created to try to undermine the succession statutes that Henry VIII put in place because, quite frankly, Henry VIII was the most legitimate king to rule in England since Edward III. That whole War of the Roses, the House of York and the House of Lancaster, which were two lines that descended from Edward III, and they kept fighting back and forth, squabbling about who is the rightful ruler and whatever. When Henry VII defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth, he then married Elizabeth of York. And Elizabeth of York was basically the last senior remaining representative of the York line, and Henry was the last representative of the Lancaster line. So when they married, they reunited both those lines back together. Henry VIII, their son, was then the culmination of all of that, all put back together into one person. So he was literally the most legitimate king throughout that whole period of time. So,
Okay.
yeah, maybe if I could share my screen for half a second.
Yep. Yep. Just click on it. You should be able to.
Okay, where is that at?
It is underneath.
I'm not seeing anything here.
And it looks like a TV with an
Oh,
arrow.
oh, okay, here we go.
Says she's known you for 3 years. 3+
Yeah,
years.
yeah. So it is the same Lisa Fraser. Yeah. So, oops. They're just where am I here? they're just
Yes, Queen Elizabeth was a daughter. She was she should not have gotten the throne. Exactly what I was saying. King George wasn't even supposed to be our monarch.
okay.
Okay, here we go.
Can you see this?
Here you go.
Okay, so there's a few people missing on this list, but up here at the top is Edward III, King of England, and he had 4 sons. Oh no, I can't remember his name, but there's another son over here. So these are the 2 competing lines: the Duke of York and the Duke of Lancaster. That's
Oh
what
shoot.
the York House of York and the House of Lancaster. So, no, this is off. Come on, stop. Oh, where? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it big as possible.
Okay, there we go. So, it's just I can't grab it and move the page. I have to move these little bars. So here's Henry VII, and he is the son of Edmund Tudor, who married Margaret Beaufort. She's the daughter of John Beaufort, who's the son of John Beaufort. And then he's the son of John of Gaunt, who's the Duke of Lancaster, who's the son of Edward III, right? Over here, we've got Edmund of Langley, gives birth to Richard of Conisburg, but Anne de Mortimer also descends from one of Edward III's sons, right? So there's actually 2 lines that culminate here, and this is where the York said that they had seniority, even though John of Gaunt over here is senior to Edmund because he was born first, but this other guy was born before John of Gaunt, so they're saying, oh, we have seniority. So this is what's behind this whole War of the Roses thing, and so Richard Plantagenet is the son of these 2, and Edward IV is the son of Richard Plantagenet. Now, when we get into the argument being presented by Michael Abney Hastings, he says that Edward IV is illegitimate. Now, he actually has no proof of this other than this document that says that Richard Plantagenet was in battle in France between these, time periods, time A and time B, and that Edward IV was supposed to have been conceived during this time. So obviously, there's no way that Richard Plantagenet could have sired Edward IV. But that's just like absolute speculation, conjecture, and it's just a conspiracy theory. So in reality, Richard Plantagenet was in battle in France, and Cecily Neville was his wife, and she actually was in Rouen at the same time that all this was going down. So she was only like a day and a half horse ride away from where Richard was in battle. So, and there's no documentation that says that he stayed in battle all this time. It's just pure conjecture, right? So it's extremely plausible and physically capable that he was able to, travel back to see his wife and be the father of Edward. And more than likely, that's the reason she was in Rouen, so that he could do exactly that, right? He was keeping his family close. So there's no actual physical basis to this conspiracy theory. But even if we take that and accept it as fact, it completely falls apart for a couple of reasons. So one is that Edward IV, his brother was Richard III. Now, Edward IV had 2 sons, Edward, which was to become the king, and his other brother, which I don't remember his name off the top of my head here. without having it in front of me. And then he had his sister Elizabeth of York. So there's actually 3 children here, but one's missing because he's irrelevant because he's the junior child. So Edward IV dies in 1483, and in 1483, Richard III becomes the protectorate king until these 2 boys become of age, right? But what happened was this guy, Richard III, locked these 2 boys up in the Tower of London, and they were never seen again. They just disappeared. And so everybody speculates that Richard killed them, whether or not he actually murdered them or just left them to die. I don't know, but they were never ever seen again. They just disappeared. So Richard III effectively became the King of England. And so the whole premise is that if Edward IV is illegitimate, then this guy claims that the crown should have went to Anne of York and her lineage, which is where he descends from. But according to the rules of male preference primogeniture, Richard III would succeed the throne after Edward IV, which he actually did. He was the king. And Henry VII killed him. So at the Battle of Bosworth, Henry VII defeated Richard III. And as per the rules of conquest, Henry VII became the lawful king of England because he defeated Richard III in battle. And even if Henry VII was illegitimate, which he was not, but even if he was, he still would become the lawful king of England because he defeated Richard III in the Battle of Bosworth. On top of that, Henry VII marries Elizabeth of York, which is the daughter of Edward IV. Now, under the rules of male preference primogeniture, Anne of York's line only becomes relevant if everybody down here dies, right? This entire multiple lines have to become completely extinct before you would return to her line as a senior collateral branch, because the crown is owned by Edward IV, right, or inherited, whatever you want to call it, and then it's owned by Richard III, who's killed by Henry VII, who becomes the lawful king, is owned by him. The crown never went down Anne's side, right? And Anne would never inherit the throne. So, if Edward IV is the king, if his son Edward V had grown up and become king, he'd have children, they'd become king. Anne of York's line would never, ever inherit that crown, right? Like I say, unless everybody dies, right? So Henry is the lawful king by conquest. He marries Elizabeth of York, who is the legitimate daughter of Edward IV, who is the legitimate son of Richard Plantagenet, because the whole claims that he's illegitimate is nonsense to start with. So on top of defeating Richard in battle, he then marries Elizabeth of York, who is, because her brothers are dead, represents Edward IV's royal lineage. So that makes Henry VIII the most legitimate guy in this whole mess of everything, right? And that's who created the succession statutes, and he's the one that named. So here we go, right? So Henry VIII, his sister Margaret, she marries James IV of Scotland. Henry VIII's other sister, Mary Tudor. So he dictated by succession statutes that the crown goes through this line, and that's the line that I descend from. So this whole story about this guy in Australia is complete nonsense, and the only reason it was ever concocted in the first place was so that they could delegitimize Henry VIII and his succession statutes. And the reason being because they had to have some story to undo these succession statutes so that James I and all these fraudulent monarchs since him could claim that they were legitimate somehow, right? So if they call into question the succession or the legitimacy of the king who created the succession statutes, then they can say, well, the succession statutes don't really have to follow him because he wasn't legitimate anyways, right? So, but it's all nonsense. When you get to the bottom of it, the Abney Hastings claim from Australia is pure and utter nonsense. And that is like when you go to like, there's actually quite a number of people that have made claims over the years, and it's just nonsense. Like one guy says he's the reincarnated
Oh yeah, that's gonna work.
king, like from like 1,000 years ago. It's like, really, dude?
That's
Okay.
silly.
So, but what I have is an actual legal argument that I could take into any courtroom, although they can't adjudicate the matter because their authority emanates from the crown. So, but
Oh my God, yeah.
but I have everything here to prove 100 times over by law that the crown descends through Mary Tudor's line.
So how does one overthrow an illegitimate crown? Even with we have the documents. Now, how does it happen? How do you dethrone Charles?
Well, that's a good question, and you know what? I get lots of advice on that, and you know, it's all faulty advice, of course, but I mean with good intention, right? You know, I'm not knocking anybody. But here's the deal: so when one king dies, the next king automatically assumes that royal authority instantly. So the moment he takes his last breath, the next king is king, right? There's no parliamentary approval needed. There's no coronation needed. You know, there's no papal approval that's needed. It's based solely on the lineage, right? So, and because Henry put in these succession statutes, he's determining what that lineage is. So if you are the senior heir within that determined lineage, you're instantly the king. So when Elizabeth I died, William Stanley literally became the king of England, right? Although he was prevented from sitting on the throne, and that's why it's treason, right? So under those rules, but now it's a bit of a dormant claim because nobody's been sitting on the throne, right? So somebody has to claim it, right? So you have to actually take it. But that's kind of the key, is that it's not about you don't go to a court and ask them to adjudicate the matter because you can't. They have no jurisdiction to do so, right?
Yeah.
And you can't go to Parliament because actually there is no Parliament when you think about it. The Parliament that you see over there, that's just a bunch of nonsense. None of those people should even be sitting in those seats. So you can't, and their parliamentary authority emanates from the crown as well. So again, they have no jurisdiction. There is no Privy Council. So there's literally nobody that can adjudicate the matter. So the only determining factor is lineage, right? You have the succession laws, so you can establish who lineage is, and then establish your lineage. And so the senior heir in that lineage has claim, right? And that's it. So it's literally a matter of asserting the claim rather than having somebody, you know, asking for somebody's approval. And this is, again, the solution to fixing this nonsense, because you don't have to ask for permission. You literally just establish the authority and say, this is what's going to happen, right? But again, you need the public support. You know, like you can't do it by yourself, right? So anyway, so I'd just like to address Lisa Fraser there. So there's been a concerted campaign to discredit me going on for several years now, and it's been orchestrated by people within the government, and they're using pawns like Sarah Nicholson and others to spread falsities about me, discredit my character, and all kinds of things. And the basis of this is because they have known about my lineage long before I ever found out about it, right? And literally my family is the biggest threat to the New World Order going. Because if you put a person with a moral character like myself on that throne, or anyone with moral character like myself, I guess that's correct for you to say then, on that throne, there's big problems, right? For the New World Order and these parasites. They're not going to survive, right? So
most Canadians are very, you know, they really hold on to the Canadian Charter of Rights, you know,
It's a
as though it was
fantasy, man.
legitimate.
It's a fantasy.
It's such a shame, you know. And I
But
was
that's the
born into
problem.
this mess.
How do
This
you
is
wake everybody up?
yeah, it's so sad. I mean, I would love to see us become a sovereign country, but I think it's too late. I think we're in biblical times right now. You know, if even if the king were to, you know, show his documents, there's so much at the end of it of their, you know, they have the 10 kings, um,
Right, right,
and you know the little horn, which is a trump, which is a trumpet,
right,
you know, and he's going to subdue three kings: Greenland, Venezuela, Canada. And there's
right.
your three. So he's taking over three areas, not through war. So I
Well,
mean,
see,
he's
and those are all,
fulfilling scripture right now.
but those are all accrued assets now, right?
Yep.
So everything that they accumulate just goes back to the lawful king, right? And you know what? So like,
Yep.
you know, I don't know. It wasn't even that long ago. I was like, saying we should create our own constitution, and an independent Alberta.
Hmm.
Uh, but that doesn't work because, like, quite frankly, we're being selfish when you step back and take a look at the bigger picture. Because now we're abandoning the rest of our brothers and sisters in Canada and leaving them to be mutilated by the New World Order, right? So
Yeah.
that doesn't work. But also, a constitution doesn't fix any of this. All it does is creates an isolated Alberta that's now easy pickings for the New World Order, and they're gonna start inserting their people, and they'll take
Hmm.
control of that constitution within a year or two or three, right? And
Yep.
then we'll go back to the same old mess, not being able to fix anything. Whereas, and this is where, like, you really have to think big picture here. Is if
Hmm.
you have the right people, and a king doesn't operate by himself, right? Like he has inner circles, and and so if you had a solid group of people running that crown, and they were able to assert that authority over all of these nations, now you can affect real change, right? A change that unanimously protects all of the people across the board, not just a select few, or one little area or region, right? And that's kind of where I say, like, if kings rule by the grace of God, and God is behind this revelation, like, I mean, look at Esther, right? What does it say? For such a time as this, right? Perhaps you were put in this position for such a time as this. Well,
Right.
perhaps this information is being revealed for such a time as this. Like, you brought up the biblical prophecies of Revelation. Well, if we follow through with those revelations, what happens at the end? It all collapses, and God's kingdom is established on the earth, right? So perhaps this is part of that. So
Oh, good heavens! That
that's a
was a
long,
that's
long.
blocking your face there. So this is the these are the 10 regions established in 2009 by the UN. So you see Greenland, Canada, United States all joined. So he's just fulfilling the 10 kings.
Right?
That's what he's doing. So it is all biblical here. And he's just fulfilling it. He's Trump is going to be the top guy, the top king over the others.
Yeah. Well, look, they're calling him the Prince of Peace, right? And that's a title
Oh,
reserved simply
oh
for the
God.
King of Kings, right? Jesus, or
Yes.
Yahushua, right? So,
Yep. That
um,
was it was Israel that gave him they
yeah,
gave him
yeah,
this
you got
plaque
it,
right
right?
here. Covenant of Peace Award to the Prince of Peace, Donald Trump, February 2024. So yes, that was the Jewish they gave him a menorah. So he is the second coming. He is their Messiah. But they have more than one. The final Messiah in the Talmud is AI technology.
Right.
So, and it will be able to shut down your electricity, shut down your heater, so it will have power over us.
Right, and it'll cause all
And
men
if you don't
created
worship it,
equal.
you will
Right,
die.
right, yeah.
So that is the final Messiah, basically, according to the Jews, or not the Orthodox Jews. These are the Talmud Jews. They are different. I have no problem with the Talmud Jews. Sorry, the Torah Jews, but there's no such thing as Judeo-Christian. These are conflicting ideologies. They don't go together. So when they keep saying Judeo-Christian, they're trying to say that we get along. We work together. No, the bankers and the free people don't get along. Trust me.
Right. No, no, it's yeah, it's just to suck everybody in, right?
It is. It
And
is.
it's
And
like,
they've taken advantage of our good nature. And we are, Canadians are good people. Generally, well, not all, but I mean, that's every religion, every race. There are good and bad in every. So we can't, you just hate everybody in that religion. Like there are really great Jews, then there's some bad ones. And, that's just the way it is. Same with Christians. Look at Jim Jones. He was not a good Christian. He killed everybody.
right? But this throne thing goes beyond just
Yes.
religion, right?
This
Because
is the
like
creator appointed. This matters. This is why I'm so involved with it because it does matter because my faith is so strong. God appointed the kings to rule righteously, and we don't have righteousness anymore. And it's
things,
poison in the minds of children at this point. So we're at an end game situation, and the white Christians are the target right now across Europe, in Canada. I mean, that's why this mass immigration. These people don't like us. They don't like it, white people. So that's something I won't be quiet about. You
well,
know.
I mean, it is a problem, right? But I mean,
Hmm.
that's being orchestrated by these people in Davos,
Yes.
the
Yes.
World Economic Forum, the UN, and interesting. Oh man, there's a lot to deal with. Like, so when we talk about accrued assets and all that stuff, the United Nations, the WEF, the Bank of England, District of Columbia, all this stuff that they're using to implement this new world order, that
Yep.
all belongs to the lawful crown of 1603. And this is what I mean. When you put the right guy on that throne, the whole
Yeah.
thing comes tumbling down, right? The house of cards falls, and now you're able to just get rid of the rights. Um,
Hmm.
but as far as like religion and race and stuff goes, um, you know this is where like this throne thing goes beyond religion, and it's for the people combined, right? Like I don't care if you got brown, yellow, red, white, blue
Hmm.
skin. Well, I mean, I might have a problem if you got green skin, but
You have to see a doctor for that.
you might need to put you back in the lizard cage, right? But the you know a king's role is to govern the realm, and that it doesn't matter what race you are, and
Hmm.
even you know like I mean you want to be tolerant to some aspect of like it's that's a really fine line, right, when you get into the religion thing, and
Oh
what you
yeah.
can or can't be this or that. But
Yeah. Oh yeah.
so I just try to elevate above that and say, look, we're
Hmm.
all people, right? And I don't care what color your skin is, but we've got to do what's right as a people across the board. And so
Hmm.
if you want to carry on evil, well then uh, we'll have to deal with that. But um,
Yep.
we're here to represent the entire populace, right, and protect them. And so we can't have a bunch of undocumented illegals coming in and turning the place into a dump and stuff like that. Just doesn't work. And why is your parliament in Britain allowing this? Why is your king in England allowing this? Right? Like this is not okay. It's completely like the king is bound by law to protect
Yep.
the realm, right? Like
Yep.
the realm is under the protection of the king. So what's going on here, right? Like this is unacceptable. And but the problem is that they're actually not the king at all. So
Yes. Well, I guess that's all we can cover for now. I mean, we have gone into a lot, and it's worth looking into. I think all these religions have been modified to divide us, and a lot of times I see where bad men have injected their own beliefs and what they want and how they want to live into their books, into these books. Once you get into printed paper, you can edit anything you like. And when you have authority, you definitely can do whatever you like. And it's not only the crown that has been usurped; it's also the Vatican and religions. I've seen imams misquote the Quran to radicalize, their students, and I was pissed off because I read the Quran and I knew he wasn't quoting it right, and he was deliberately radicalizing his people. So this is unacceptable to me. When you are a teacher, you have to be legitimate. You cannot, it's a crime against humanity to divide, to further divide us. That's not my role. My role is to share what I've learned and lift the veil. I think we really need to, we're going to split into two different groups, those that believe in God and those who do not. And there's nothing we can do about that. We have to accept everyone for who they are. We just have to put them in the place they belong. You know, we are the CEO of our own lives, and we have to govern and protect that soul, that precious soul that we have. Thank you so much for coming on, John. And I look forward to our next show. We're going to talk about something totally different. Danielle Smith and that whole election, everything that you found out, and also your son, which is a very heartbreaking story. Um, we don't have to do a show about that, but um, I think that's a horrible thing, and it shows the corruption in the RCMP. But I appreciate your time so much. Thank you so much for coming and sharing all your information, your knowledge, your research, and if there anything final words that you wanted to say before we shut down tonight or today.
Yeah, well, I would like to state so everybody knows this information that I've compiled. It's been distributed. It's stored off-site, multiple spots. So it's not going to disappear. If anything were to ever happen to me, it would be publicly available information. That being said, the issues with my son that relate now I understand relate to you know the lineage here, and if I'm an heir, well then he's an heir as well, right? So I believe that's what's going on. They are reptiles. They are reptiles. Yeah, yeah. The parasites, right? So it's time. It's time to bring out the exterminator and get to work and get rid of the parasites, right? Get rid of the bugs that are um, destroying our world.
Yes. Thank you, John.
Paul,
Sorry. Thank you, Paul. I was looking at a comment by John.
uh,
That's why I had John in my brain. Hi, John. Absolutely. So yes, Paul, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for everyone for participating in the comment section and following. This will be archived on X and Facebook and YouTube and Rumble, Substack, where my book is. And my book is fiction, but it's based on the Sumerian tablets. So it's a three-part series. I'm just releasing part two, which is very bad. It's about a girl, and she basically has powers, and she uses them for evil. So it's the dark side of my series, and but I appreciate your time, and all of you at home. Thank you for joining me on the Truth Table.
thanks, Paul.